There are several things that strike me about today's readings. Two in particular, how calls are extended, and then how the call is received and acted upon. Isaiah, 1 Corinthians, and Luke are about a call that is issued to do something different, to do something that seems to many of us extraordinary, difficult, incomprehensible. Now, many just dismiss these stories with, well, this is Isaiah, one of the great prophets, or this is one of the these are the four principal disciples, or this is Paul. They're special. I would never be asked to do that, or I couldn't do it. I don't for a minute believe that they are special. In fact, if you look at the disciples, the men and women that Jesus called were anything but extraordinary. Take James, John, Peter, and Andrew. Peter and Andrew were simple fishermen. Peter in particular is one of my favorite guys, because if a guy who screws up as regularly as Peter does can be listed as one of the great apostles, there's hope for all of us. I admit that once in a while, I have what I refer to as a Peter moment, when I intended to do something good, and it didn't quite happen quite out that way, or something I said is not heard in the way I intended it. Peter did that a lot. And so, okay, that's good. But Peter and Andrew in the other books are simple fishermen, poor fishermen. They didn't even have a boat. They were casting their nets on the shore. James and John, well, they were doing a little bit better. They had a dad who had boats and hired men. But I'm willing to bet that like 90% of the people of that day, they were probably illiterate fishermen, not learned people. They knew that no catch meant not only no food, but no money for that day. Empty nets were a disaster. In fact, almost everybody in Jesus' circles were like Jesus, from the margins in some way or other. The prostitute, the tax collector, the sinner. Then some will say, but, with the disciples, they just got up and left to follow Jesus. I could never do that. They didn't even know him. Now, I want to ask, what makes you think they didn't know Jesus prior to this? Luke in particular is very specific about this. Think about what we've been hearing over the last 3 weeks. Jesus has started his ministry in Capernaum. Last week he returns to Nazareth, and they want him to do the same miracles in Nazareth that he did in Capernaum, and now he's back to Capernaum. Capernaum is their hometown. He goes to Peter's house and heals his mother-in-law of a fever in the previous couple of verses. How could Peter, Andrew, James, and John not have known him? Capernaum is a small town. Think in terms of one of the smaller developments in our city of maybe 150 houses like I have in mind. You know everybody, and everybody knows you. No, Jesus was most certainly known to everybody in town, in particular, the 4 boys. Now remember, there's a crowd gathered to hear him, a crowd so large they had to get a little distance from them by going out in one of the boats. This means he's drawn people from all over outside of Capernaum, as well as from the village. His fame is clearly already spreading. I truly believe it's very likely, in fact probable, that the 4 men knew Jesus and may have listened to him several times, probably in the synagogue. The synagogue in Capernaum, by the way, is about the size of this section of our church hall. Now, that's maybe 100 people tight pack. I truly believe that they knew him. They just didn't up and run away with some stranger. I think the more likely explanation is that Jesus knew he had done the groundwork and it was time to really take his show on the road, because this is where everything really takes off from. People often look past the scene where after the teaching, he tells them to go out to deeper water and cast their nets. In fact, this can be left out, and I would never do that. You can hear in their reply, "Oh, Master," there's another hint that they knew him. "Master, we have been fishing all night, but if you say so, we'll try it again." And I say it with that inflection very purposefully, because I'm sure that's how I would have reacted. Yet in the end, they say, if you say so, we'll let down the nets. Now, that Jesus issues his call to them, it says, fish for people. Be when the last of the 10th day is wildly successful. By the way, fishing is best in that area is done in the early morning in the dark. By this time of day, they just don't go fishing. And Peter says to him, go away from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man. How often do we make excuses like that when we are called? I am not worthy. I have these flaws. I'm not good enough. You must have somebody else in mind. I've used all those excuses, by the way. That's just self-talk. I do this all the time. Isaiah says, I'm a man of unclean lips. Don't send me. And God's response is he touches a coal to his lips and heals him to take away excuse. Then he says, here I am, send me. Moses, oh, no, I'm poorly spoken. I can't go and face Pharaoh. Okay, take Aaron with you. He can talk for you. God always does this. A couple weeks ago, I spoke about the Japanese art of kintsugi, where a broken piece of pottery is repaired with gold that seals it. What has been broken is repaired and made stronger, more beautiful in the repair. God heals. God will repair whatever flaws we have and then use us to move forward towards the kingdom if we allow God to do that. I will remind you of one of my favorite sayings. God does not call the equipped. God equips those who God calls. Listen to that again. God does not call the equipped. God equips those who are called. So why does God call people? Maybe even you. Because God needs us to create the world we live in. Seminal moment in my understanding of God came in a lecture I heard by Brother Martin Smith, member of the Society of St. John the Evangelist, the Episcopal Monastery in Boston. And the talk was called Co-Creators with God. In this talk, he proposes that yes, God has a plan, but God works with and through us to put that plan into action. We co-create the world with God. He makes the statement that most people tell me they want to peek in the holy filing cabinet. They want to get in there, see their file, and see what's there. He said the only problem is when they get there and they open the file up, they find that their file stops at today. Because we have to write the rest of it with God. God has an overarching plan for the welfare of humanity, but he needs us, as St. Francis says, as his hands and feet. The plan will go on without your help, but it misses your contribution. You miss the chance to be a part of God's creative process. Call can be something other than some clear voice from God. A call can come from within in response to what you see happening around you. I've heard this said by many people. I can't watch the news anymore. It's too painful, too divisive, too depressing. Doesn't matter on which side of the argument you're on. The fact I'm talking about sides tells you something. I understand that. One of my favorite memes out there right now is my desire to stay informed and my desire to stay sane are in direct conflict. You've seen that. Those of you who are on Facebook, I guarantee you've seen that. But that's not the answer. It's not to disengage, to hide our heads. Is it really what we as Christians are called to do? No. We are called to respond to our baptismal call, where, as I told the confirmation class, we are all ministers of the gospel. And we all, by baptism, respect the dignity of every human being, that we love our neighbor as ourselves, as our church motto reminds us. Richard Rohr wrote this: Christians are meant to be the visible compassion of God on earth, more than those who are just going to heaven when they die. They're the leaven who agree to share the fate of God for the life of the world now, and thus keep the whole batch of dough from collapsing on itself. A Christian is invited, not required, to accept and live the cruciform shape of all reality. It is not a duty or even a requirement, but it is a free vocation. Some people feel called and agree not to hide from the dark side of things or the rejected group or the other, but in fact to draw close to the pain of the world and allow it to change their perspective and govern their action. They agree to embrace the imperfection and even injustice, allowing the situations to change them from the inside out, which is the only way we are changed in any way. Now stop and think about the idea of a call from God as being leaven to the dough. Consider this a call to be someone who lifts up our world rather than allowing the world to beat you down. What might it look like for you to be the leaven for the dough of the world? This is a vocation that you are free to choose, but one that you can also walk away from. One thing is certain, the invitation will come back around. Jesus never gives up on anybody. God is always inviting us to be leaven. I can identify 4 times in my life where I now know God was calling me up to be doing what I'm doing right now. It just took me until I was in my 40s to finally listen. But the call kept coming back again and again until I couldn't run away from it any longer. There's a famous poem, The Hound of Heaven, that talks about that. Always look at a call as an invitation, not a command. Jesus never says, he says, do not be afraid. From now on, you will be catching people. This is not a do this or else command, but an invitation. You always have free choice. So I invite you to join me. Share in my journey is what he's asking you. Be willing to embrace the imperfection and injustices of the world to bring about the change from the inside out, as Father Rohr says. Or is it in changing the little things that we change the world? We can't tackle the big stuff, but we can tackle the stuff that's right in our backyard. That's what the closing blessing that I read every week tells us to do. So do not be afraid. Jesus is inviting you to something exciting, something wonderful, something holy, something life-changing, something that he will equip you for. So do not be afraid to say yes to God's invitation to change the world. Amen. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.